Hello, everyone. Today's episode will be with Matt Hogan. It was a fantastic conversation, and some of the topics that we covered are what attention to detail says about a person, the intrinsic benefits of martial arts and physical challenges, the importance of building specific skills, and why the long-term vision is substantially important. We talk about much more than this. Those are just a few of the key topics. If you enjoy and listen on Spotify, drop me a rating, and on Apple Podcast, a review would be greatly appreciated. I could not do this without you, and I hope you get some value. Have a good day. Enjoy the conversation. Have you read all those books?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think the challenge of reading is that, in my opinion, the more you read, the more you want to read, right? So like I'll read one book and that one book leads me to 10 other books. And then those 10 other books lead me to 10 other books in and of themselves. And then, so I've just accepted my fate that my book list is always going to be bigger than the books that I've actually read. So I've just accepted that as my reality. Of the books on that shelf, I've probably read maybe 15%, I would say.
Yeah, well, I do agree. It takes a long time to get through a book, and it's a good problem to have when we have a abundance of information and knowledge to look into. But the color scheme is beautiful. Yeah, credits to her.
Yeah, and it's funny because I don't know, I actually have an easier time finding the books. I'm a very visual type learner. And so when I see, like, if I'm trying to find a book, I can see the cover color in my head and find the book that way faster than I can like remember sometimes the author or like how it's organized that way. So this works perfectly for me.
Yeah, that I resonate with that as well. On my bookshelf, I have them all in order from largest to smallest, not in colors, and I don't have nearly as many books as you, but it's just that attention to detail. I think a lot of people don't have it, but the people who do have that OCD-ish type of perception, I need things to be clean and on point. It helps.
Yeah, as a martial artist, I can definitely appreciate that because it's, that's what makes the difference between the beginner and the master is the attention to details, right? And so how you pay close attention to those details is going to be indicative of how you're able to, throw a punch, right? The difference between a white belt being able to throw a punch and a black belt being able to throw a punch is in the way the details are minded in the process. You know what I mean? So it's like, I can show anybody how to punch in one day, but it's going to take me a hell of a lot of days to get you to pay attention to every single one of the details that have to be taken into account in that process. And so details are everything for, just being able to move from a beginner side of a craft to like a more masterful side of a craft. So I can definitely appreciate that. And I do try to represent a person who pays close attention to details as much as I can.
Yeah, in all crafts, whatever it is, that attention to details is prevalent. It's not just a specific realm, but it is applicable for any space that we're looking to improve our skills in and be better at. So it's beautiful when you understand that it's not as if the master is any different from the beginner, but they're the same. It's just that experience of working the details through a period of time. I prioritize the smallest aspects in my life because over the past few years of working on myself, that's what I've came to understand. The biggest things are the smallest things. Weird enough.
And you're not wrong. I can certainly relate to that. And for, again, examples in the martial arts world, but everything even to details of the website. I mean, the person that takes the time to, curate and fix the little things are the ones who are living a life that kind of exemplifies that mindset of caring enough to pay attention to the details. And that care, I think, is fundamentally why details are important, because it shows a level of care that a person who doesn't have those details minded maybe doesn't have. And I want to be working with somebody who cares about those details in a intimate way, because that's the kind of person that I would want to become, I guess.
Right. It's like you look up to certain people who you admire and you take a few points from who they are and why you admire them. And for me, I'm always drawn to those who are precise and accurate with what they're trying to portray, no matter if it's communication or the website example or MMA, martial arts, in all realms, or even cars. I'm a big car guy. Everything in general, it the details that go into it shows you something about that person, and you're putting a good example out there if you're to the T with the finest details of whatever aspect you're working with.
Yeah, I think you're right on about that, Justin, for sure. I think you're right on.
So tell me a little bit about your martial arts journey and how that has helped you become a more detailed and purposeful person in general.
Sure. I started my martial art training. I actually remember the date of my first class. It was April 11th, 2001. And I was so excited to start martial art class that I memorized that date because I wasn't able to enroll right away. So I had to wait 2 weeks before I could actually go and take my first class. So I was counting down the days, very excited. I definitely had some kind of innate pull to it. I felt just some kind of calling to, go and do martial arts at the time in my life that I was at. And so when I went in to take my first martial art class, my parents were pretty nervous about the whole idea, just, not really knowing what to expect. And if I was going to have to fight the sensei and, things like this and blah, blah. But nonetheless, I ended up having a really great experience walking in, and I had people that were just real welcoming and warm and kind of embodied everything that I wanted to become as a person at the time. When I joined, when I decided to try martial arts, it was because I was overweight, I was shy, I was self-conscious, and I needed something to kind of change that. And so martial arts was just an idea that came to my head. It kind of, like I said, called to me. And so when I went into the school and met those instructors and I saw these people who were, strong and confident and spoke with conviction, they represented kind of everything I wanted to become. And when I saw that living embodiment of who I wanted to become, and they were kind of like role modeling that example for me, I was completely captivated. And because I was completely captivated, I paid I'm like a sponge when I'm into something. I mean, because I'm a visual learner, I'll freeze in time and space and I'll just soak everything in. And while I'm in that process of soaking everything in, if I can get a clear mental image in my head of what something is supposed to look like, then I'll obsess over it until I can get it as close to that image as possible. And so I'll give you a couple examples of how, to answer your question about details, how this kind of unfolded for me. So when I first started training, I started coming 2 or 3 classes per week, loved it, started coming in more, maybe 4 or 5 times per week, loved it more, couldn't get enough of it. So I started coming every day except Sunday. And I was coming in for, to get as much information as I can. I was blessed to have a diverse instructor crew who was like just so good at switching up the classes, disguising repetition, keeping classes interesting, things like this. And so when I was there learning from them, I was always like I said, soaking everything in like a sponge. And then I was starting to collect all this information. And then I would see my instructors compete and I would see them perform and I would see them do things that I wanted to do. And I wanted to be able to do them as good as them. And so I started coming in early so that I could train extra. And I would ask questions and I would ask the instructors that were there to help me. And then I would stay after class to do the same thing. And then I started assisting classes. So then I would come in and I would help classes for kids that were younger than me or belts that were lower than me, and started showing them how to do some of the things that I was learning. And so it was I was like one step ahead and trying to get them up to that step that I was on. And then so that process continued until I was helping a whole bunch of classes. And then it got to the point where I would come in early and I would go into the back. There's 2 big training floors at the school. There's a main training floor and then there's a back training floor. And so what I would do is I would finish school. I would walk home. It was it was like a 5-minute walk home from school. And then it was about a mile walk to my academy. And so I would walk home from school. I would walk to the academy as fast as possible. I would get there. I would go into the back training room, the private training room, and I would play these mental images in my head over and over and over again. And as I would replay them in my head, I would use the mirrors to kind of look and see, like, was I doing the things that I was playing in my head? And that was my process. It was about getting the mental image to the actual reality image as close to possible as I possibly could. And so I obsessed over that. And I did that all the time. And I was there 6 days a week. At 12 years old, I was there 6 days a week, 13 years old. And I was there, like I said, absorbing as much as I could. I'll give you one more example. As my journey unfolded, eventually got to the point where I was pretty competent. You know, I got my black belt and I had a pretty good idea of what I was doing. I had a pretty good head on my shoulders. So I was showing good leadership and I was helping out classes and, you know, teaching people in a way that was well received. And then I got asked to run the school's demo team, right? So the demo team is just the community team that goes out and does martial art performances to either inspire people to maybe want to do martial arts themselves, or for the purposes of just education, right? And be able to teach people like what we do and why we do it. And so I got put in charge of that team. And at the time, and this is kind of like an interesting sidetrack here, but at the time, this is when YouTube started popping, right? So this is back in, I don't know when YouTube was officially started, but it came onto my radar in my circle, in my community back in, I'd say 2014, 2015. And it was around that time that it started like really coming into my radar. And so I started like looking up martial arts on YouTube, like whatever was out there. And I came across a style of martial arts that was being performed that was kind of evolving in real time. And YouTube was like in real time sharing this evolution of this martial arts style that I was starting to see. And it was called XMA, right? XMA it kind of stood for like extreme martial arts. And it was this really cool hybrid style of martial arts that combined martial arts kicks with gymnastics flips with like breakdancing style. And it put all three of those together into this like hybrid way of expressing yourself. And I was obsessed. And so again, replay that whole pattern over again. I was watching these videos nonstop. I was trying to absorb all of them as much as I can. And one of the reasons the style evolved this way is because in martial art tournaments, there were divisions, like form divisions. So in martial art tournaments, there's different divisions you can compete in. You can spar, you can do forms, you can do weapons, you can do board breaking. You know, you pick and choose what you want to do, and you can compete in that division. In one of the divisions, it was called an open form division. Now, because there's so many different martial arts styles, right? You got your karate, you got your taekwondo, tang soo do, you got your, you know, all sorts of different things, right? Because there's different styles, when you have an open tournament, when you have an open martial art tournament, you have to figure out how to put styles together so that they can compete against each other properly, because different styles have different ways of doing things. And so what happened was they created this open form division. And the open form division was a division that was open, and it didn't have any stylistic requirements, right? So you didn't have to have like karate, like you didn't have to do pre-designated karate forms or pre-designated taekwondo forms. You had the ability to just do an open form. And that's what led to this evolution of what became known as like kind of like XMA. And because, again, like I said, YouTube was around, everybody was sharing everything that they were doing. And then I would just play the videos, play it back in slow motion, try it in the mirror, and I would try to mind all the little details in the process that made it look as good as what I was seeing. Because a lot of times I'll give you an easy example. Like you got your boxer, right? What's the difference between a professional boxer's jab and cross and an amateur's jab and cross, right? It's how the details are minded in the process, but it's also the timing, the distancing, the awareness, and then just how they're able to execute those things. And so I just, like I said, I obsessed over it. I drilled it and I did it over and over again. And that's like the story of how, long story short, I mean, I've been in martial arts for over 20 years. And so long story short, that's kind of the evolution of just how I received all that information and put it into practice and put it into a style that I'm able to express today. So there's a couple examples of how that has unfolded for me.
It's beautiful because it's all rooted in your natural you were drawn to martial arts naturally.
Yep.
And something that would have never occurred is you taking all of those steps to research and visualize if you were not naturally pulled towards that. And it's a big, I wouldn't say problem, but something that I try to spread the message about to more people is find what really is your natural interest, because once you figure out that, it won't feel like work. You're walking, you're doing all these things that if martial arts was something that you didn't fully enjoy and admire, you would have quit, and you wouldn't, there's no way you'd be able to become the skill level that you're at now. But since it was just a innate desire for you to improve, and you love the environment, it was a supporting area where you're learning, and now you're able to teach others what you've learned. Like, this doesn't happen with something that you don't enjoy naturally. And the schooling systems bother me because they don't give the individual the ability to figure out what their natural interests are. They treat everyone the same and just force feed a bunch of curriculum down your throat, when kids could be so much more intelligent if they would say, hey, what do you naturally want to do? And then you get that energy like you have with martial arts, and then you become amazing at it because you are pulled to it, rather than just having something thrown at you and no other options. And they treat everyone like they're the same. And for me, I'm naturally drawn to learning and communicating and building relationships. It just feels so right for me. So networking, getting the podcast going, having guests on, doing this, it's not work. It's something that I fully enjoy. And hence, that's why I'm able to do it at the highest capacity. We need to figure out what our natural desires are. And then once you figure that out, there's no limits. You set your limits. And in your case, you didn't have any limits, and look where you are now with the martial arts.
Yeah, it's a good point, Justin. And I would like to add a little bit on top of that, because I read a really great book. I'm pretty sure it was So Good They Can't Ignore You. And I can't remember who it's by, but I can remember the color of the book. But nonetheless, So Good They Can't, I think it's, I don't want to say it wrong. So anyways, nonetheless, there's a really great concept in that book that I wanted to share. And he pretty much kind of talks about how follow your passion is bad advice, and there's a better approach, right? And so everything you're saying is right. You have to follow your natural curiosities. You have to follow your natural inclinations. You have to have that sense of natural draw, right? You have to have that appeal to do that kind of work, or whatever it is that you're being drawn to. And then, but what he says is, if you don't, like, let's say you don't have a curiosity that is obvious to you, and you're not really sure what direction you're being pulled in. The reason follow your passion could be perceived as bad advice is because it has like a passive tone to it, where it's like, I'm just going to wait for a passion to come to me. I'm going to wait for something to call to me, and I'm going to wait for it to come up before I start doing things, or I'm going to start before I can move on a path forward. And kind of what he argues is that a better approach would be to build skills, right? So rather than just wait to follow your passion, do things that'll help you build skills up, because there's an interesting byproduct of building skills. And what happens is, when you build skills and get good at the skill you're building, you then start to like it. And when you start to like the thing you're good at, it kind of reinforces it all over again, which kind of perpetuates it forward. And then it can ultimately become your passion, which is kind of one of the points he was arguing in that book. Become so good they can't ignore you. Work on building skills so much in an area that you enjoy, or at least don't hate, until you can get to the point of being good, because that'll probably reinforce the liking of it, because people like things they're good at. And then that will start delivering the passion, because, and that's, he made a case for that in many different ways throughout the book, about how people started building a skill up. They weren't really that interested in it when they started, but once they became good at it, they freaking loved it. and they loved it because they were good at it. And so I think that that's an interesting extension. Just to plug there is that curiosity is so important. And if you don't know what is drawing you, or what you're drawn to, or like what your path is, a really good starting point is to go back to what you were naturally drawn to as a kid, and drawn to, like, one of the reasons I think I was so drawn to martial arts was because as a kid, I was obsessed with Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, wrestling, all that stuff. You know what I mean? And so I think that planted a seed for me when I was young, seeing all these like martial art moves and flips and cool kicks and blah, blah, and fight scenes. And then later, fast forward, 10, 12 years, whatever it was, I see, this martial arts school, and it's like, damn, that kind of is drawing, like, I'm drawn to that. I want to become that. And I think it was because of those curiosities I had as a kid. And so they connected. So I just wanted to put that plug in there, because I think it's so important for people to hear this idea that if you don't know what you want to do in your life, either A, go back to what you were curious about as a kid and start exploring that. And B, if you're not really exactly sure, pick something that would lead you to build a valuable skill set. And there's many different skill sets you can build in today's world that could become valuable for you, or at least can provide for a beautiful lifestyle. But build skills up that are valuable, that could be exchanged for income, so that you could, have a lifestyle that you enjoy. And as you're building the skills up, continue to reinvest in yourself and keep that process going until you find that place where you want to be and you get really good at something. So yeah, just wanted to plug that in there, because I think that was a really good point you brought up.
Yeah, everything that you just said has been very true to my personal life story. It's you don't get good at something and enjoy it because you're good at it. You have to start as a beginner, whatever area you're working on. And as long as you don't hate it, that's a sign, because you're not going to start brilliant at anything. But if you can have that vision and kind of see, or a few people you admire and you look up to them, that's a sign that maybe you should try and build some of the skills that those whom you admire have. And this really comes down to having a bit of a clear vision in who you want to become, because it's not easy to know who you want to become, but it really is rooted in asking yourself questions and just being curious about the path that you'd like to go on. For me, I really was not looking forwards to working a 9 to 5 and doing something that I didn't feel passionate about. So I asked a few questions. How do people escape that and build their own type of lifestyle? And I was led down the path of the stock market or real estate. So I spent so much time investing in my stock market education. At first, it was horrible. I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it because I saw the potential. I knew the vision or the lifestyle that I was looking to create. And over time, I've come to enjoy the stock market, but it only happened through consistent effort to educate myself, take notes, and indulge in the proper content that allows me to build my skills, rather than doing something where there is no bigger vision. Having a little bit of clarity and a wider lens on what you would like to do with your life, that's a great place to start, because what you spoke on before, we don't know what our passions are. You have to try things and fail a lot. I like the idea, the people who are really successful, they are the ones who have failed and failed and failed. But instead of looking at it as a mistake or a failure, they say, okay, that didn't work. What lessons can I pull from it? Let's pivot. Let's keep going. So a lot of this is just asking yourself questions and having more of a 10-year vision rather than a 2-week vision.
That's so crucial, this idea of a 10-year vision versus a 2-year vision. If you can start off your path with the idea of a long-term vision and a long-term goal and a long-term reward, that'll take you way further than the quick fix, the shortcut, and all the different things that you see in today's world, the get rich quick schemes, those things are they're gonna lead you down a path of very, very short-term, maybe short-term reward, but long-term frustration. And if you can switch that and change it so that you're focused long-term, it'll lead to more short-term frustration, but long-term reward. And I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that, like you said, you're going to hit failures along the way, but those failures become short-term frustrations because they're leading you on a path towards achieving something that you ultimately want to achieve. And so if you can move your timeline out and you can focus on the bigger picture of what it is you're trying to achieve, then you'll be much, much more content in the process moving forward. I think that that's super important, because I think in today's world, there's a lot of desire to want to get what you want fast and get where you want to be fast. And so you mentioned something important, this idea of kind of like going counterculture. Like you were talking about not wanting to have a 9-to-5. And so you wanted to do something different. So you pivoted and you wanted to try something else. And so I think that with that same idea in mind, being able to keep the long-term vision in play and be able to keep where it is that you want to end up in play, then what happens is you're able to take those little steps, one step at a time, get the information that you need from each of those individual steps, and let those little frustrations lead to the knowledge and the insight that'll help carry you forward so that you're able to get to that path you want to get. Because if the rest of culture is trying to get there quick, then maybe the counterculture idea is to be okay moving slow. And I think that that's the big difference for me, is taking your time. Like wanting to take your time on something is a really great indication that you're on the right path, right? And I think that that's really important to point out, because if I look at people, even on Twitter, that's how we met, right? When I look at different people who are posting things and talking about things, you can get a sense of like their urgency scale. Like when people sometimes post things, you can see like they're urgent to want to get like, I want to get like 50,000 followers now. I got to make this much a month. I got to do this, that, and the other thing. And they're on, you can just sense the urgency in their voice because they want to make it happen now. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? If you have the energy for it and you're excited about it, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think that if you want to carry that kind of momentum going forward, because that's a sprinting pace, right? And with sprinting paces, you're going to need to have to account for some rest and recovery, because that's naturally the pace that you're putting out. And so when you hit a brick wall, or you hit, zero and you were hoping to make 10K and you make $0 and something, and you hit some frustrations and some whatever, that might lead to burnout, stopping and quitting, right? Whereas if you can become comfortable with taking your time, and not taking your time as in complacent, but taking your time as in on a steady path forward that's at a good pace, a marathoning pace, a pace that would be just hard enough where it's a little bit above like walking kind of, but it's not as fast as sprinting. And you got that middle zone and you feel like you can keep this pace for a long damn time. And so I think that that's important to point out for anyone's journey. Is I would recommend people look for a pace where you don't feel like you're in a rush, but you feel like you're able to better just enjoy the pace that you're on, because that's, I think, ultimately how you can enjoy the journey, which is what you hear time and again. So much it's become a cliche, but you got to enjoy the journey. And how do you do that? Not by sprinting. I don't enjoy any scenery when I'm sprinting. All I'm thinking about when I'm sprinting is that this is fucking awful and I want to stop, right? But when you slow the pace down, like when I'm like, I can think of times when I have run really long distances, and I think about how I've been able to like look at the scenery and enjoy the view and soak in what's happening in my surroundings and kind of be in that moment. And I think that that is metaphorically powerful for what should happen in our journeys as well, moving from where we want to be or where we are to where we want to be. And so being okay with this idea that I'm taking my time, I think is a huge indication that you're on the right path.
It can't be a sprint if you really want to have that cliche, enjoy the journey. What happens to us is we say, I want this, and it turns into a I'll be happy when I get, I'll be happy because of. But we've gone through this. Once you get that thing, you move the flagpole immediately. You do get some nice dopamine in the moment, maybe the first day, first hour of getting something brand new, but then it fades quickly. And it's there's this MMA fighter, Israel Adesanya. I probably butchered the last name, but the day that he won his lightweight title, he said that was the most depressed he's ever felt. He got what he was working for, and then he went to therapy immediately because he couldn't handle what that felt like. And from most people watching from the couch on the TV, you think he's on the top of the world. He feels amazing. But this is the intricacy of the human mind. It's so challenging if you're not able to enjoy the day-by-day process of whatever journey you're on. We're trying to speak in general to help each individual because we know everyone is at a different point looking for different things. But if there's ways to live by principles, and if you are able to be at that slow, moderate pace, it's a fine line. You don't want to become complacent. And how can you become aware of if you might be complacent? Well, if you're not challenging yourself, if the days are becoming stale and boring, and this is where things like journaling and reading and reflection come in, because once you participate in your self-reflection, your consciousness knows what you're supposed to be doing. And often we're so distracted that our consciousness never has the ability to get through to us. So if you meditate or you go on nature walks, you'll figure out real quick what you're supposed to be doing. It's not going to be just written in words on your forehead, but the way that we're not human beings, we're spiritual beings of energy within human bodies. And I'm not one to boast upon religion, because religion can be used as a divisive tool, but just understand we're all connected. We all come from one creator, and that creator has a specific purpose for you. But for you to find that purpose, it takes some intertwining moments where you have to be in silence. There's real power in solitude, because then you'll get these ideas that come to the surface, and it's just urging you to ask some questions and figure out, what do I need to be doing today? Just focus on the things that will get you further one day at a time. You don't climb a mountain by thinking about all the steps you have to take. It's one step at a time. And that's an important premise for everyone to understand.
Yeah, I super agree. I just love that idea that you mentioned. I think about this often, that, you're not going to have the answers tattooed on your forehead. That's something you're going to have to figure out through introspection. And I think it's important that, we understand that our internal drive, our desires, don't speak to us in words, right? They speak to us in real quiet, intuitive, abstract, convoluted, not very clear messages and symbolism and blah, blah, right? So it's not like English language that we're being communicated in when we're following our heart or intuition, right? It's a feeling. And so how do we get more in tune with that feeling? We have to, like you said, create more space for stillness or silence. And I think that's super important, because when I think about the nature of the world we live in today, because we're so exposed to information, we're constantly being pushed around in every which direction, right? And this even started when we were kids. When we were kids, we're getting pushed by our, not in every case, but in most cases, we're getting pushed by our parents to do certain things, to become certain kinds of people, to have certain kind of beliefs. And then we get pushed by our relatives and the people in our extended families in different directions or similar directions. We get pushed by our friends to do things, believe things, do certain things. And then we start getting pushed by social media, which is a huge one. and all the different external influences that we expose ourselves to every day with the internet at our thumb's disposal. And so all of these different sources are pushing us all over the place. And so of course you're confused. Of course you don't have a very clear idea of where you want to go, because from when you were a kid, you've been getting pushed around to, go down this path, and another person pushes you down this path, and then two people push you in two different directions at the same time. And then all the while inside, you're thinking of, like, you have these intuitions and these curiosities that are forming, and you're thinking about them, but then they get suppressed and they get silenced and quieted because you're too busy getting pushed around by everything else happening. And then you got this just chaos of just a convoluted mess in your mind. And it's hard to see anything when the pond of your mind is so mudded, right? And so the only way that you can make that still is by finding time for stillness, because what does that do? You have to block out all of the incoming sources. You have to block out all of the incoming sources of information, friends, family, spouses, media, TV, all of it. And like you said, nature is great, meditating is great, writing is great, but it has to be phone absent, people absent, distraction absent. And when you find that, and all of those different pushing sources kind of quiet, then the pulling kind of comes back out again. And you can follow and listen more closely to what's pulling you, which can help you go back to what we were talking about before, figure out what your path is to move forward and how you can find your path moving forward. If you feel like you have a convoluted mind, it's probably because you do have a convoluted mind. And how do you clear that up? By creating space for reflection and stillness and solitude, right? So that's a really important point, super important in today's world, more important than ever before. And I would certainly recommend that everybody find time for stillness every day, because stillness is absolutely the key to mental clarity, and mental clarity is the key to moving forward in life, following a clear line compass. Without clarity, you're going to be walking around in every which direction because your compass is confused, pointing all over the damn place. But the only way to get your compass cleared up is to settle the mind, find mental clarity, and to take it even a step further, calibrate your compass by reading and digging deep into the minds of those who have come before us, who have done a lot of the heavy lifting. A lot of these brilliant minds who have come before us, they spent their life trying to figure out how to answer some of the questions that we ask ourselves every day. And the answers are right here, right behind me, right? And all you got to do is pick it up and make some time to fucking read it. So yeah, really good point.
Right. And everything you said is powerful right there. And a step before getting that mental clarity, something that is really imperative for me to feel good on each and every day, is the fundamental basics to being a human being, like avoiding processed foods, staying away from seed oils, consuming whole foods with 1 to 2 to 3 ingredients. If I like this little simple idea, if I can't pronounce it, I shouldn't eat it. Like, there are so many chemicals that are just mind-boggling. You can't even pronounce the word, but you're putting it in your body on a routinely basis. So to get the mental clarity, we have to treat our body, the vessel that we have, properly, which means hydrating and drinking a good amount of water, staying away from just a bunch of excess sugars, and make sure you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I've known a lot of people in my life who think they're the outlier. Literally 90% of human beings, maybe 99%, need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. But then people will act as if they're superhumans and can only need 5 or 6. That's ruining your ability to have clarity. You might still perceive yourself as doing well, but I love this idea. Once you accept how much you don't know and the idea that you really know nothing, even though we're on the journey of working to be smarter and reading and consuming good information, it's so easy to have a huge ego. So to just accept we don't know much, there's always more to learn, is a great point to furthering yourself as a human. The good things take time, and once you get a closed mindset or you get a bit arrogant, perceiving yourself as a know-it-all, you limit your potential in such a detrimental manner. Where on the other hand, if you're curious, you're open, and even with people that you might not agree with immediately, if you listen to them rather than letting your preconceived notions take over, you're going to be a wise person. And that's something that is a big struggle in our society nowadays. People won't even listen to the other side. They're just so closed off and just not observing, but more so judging immediately. If I see someone who I don't agree with, maybe how they look, what they're wearing, how they're portraying themselves, I've rewired my thoughts to not label them, to not push my preconceived notions, because I was that kid who judged everyone in my head and thought that I was better than them. And now I figured out you're not superior to anyone. Everyone is connected and your thoughts create your reality. So we need to rewire the way that we think and wish goodness for everyone and anyone.
Yeah, that reminds me of a really great story that helped me with this too, because like you said, it's easy to judge, hard to understand. And it's hard to understand anybody fully, right? Impossible, I would say, because people don't even understand them damn selves, right? Like I don't even understand myself 100%. And so it's easy to judge, and it's easy to judge people based on what you see from the outside looking in, or just based on what they're putting out for the world. But a lot of time it's just unfortunate reactions that are a byproduct of unfortunate circumstances that they had to go through and endure. And it's leading to maybe a way of acting, and that's unideal or unpleasing or whatever it might be. So one of the antidotes to that came from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff by Richard Carlson. I remember this one. And so Don't Sweat the Small Stuff is a great, easy to read book. And one of the stories he shares in there is just a real short story about how everyone, like imagine everyone else is enlightened except you. And then, it kind of hits you and you're like, what do you mean everyone else is enlightened except me? And then the idea here that he presents in the book is, if you imagine everyone else is enlightened except you, then all of a sudden, everything that people are doing, it becomes a lesson unto you. And it becomes a lesson that you have to learn to identify and then absorb the information from and then approach accordingly. And so that moody teenager that was giving you attitude, if you imagine that they're enlightened, what is it that they're trying to teach you? They're probably trying to teach you patience. And maybe they're trying to teach you understanding. And maybe they're trying to teach you how to better approach conflict resolution. What about the baby that's crying and sobbing in the store while you're waiting in line to go to the bank teller, and the baby's driving you crazy, right? Or on the airplane, even worse, right? When you're on like a 10-hour flight and the baby's crying. What is that baby trying to teach you? Again, maybe patience, maybe compassion. Maybe it's trying to teach you, maybe it's trying to remind you that what you have to endure for 10 hours, that parent has to endure 24/7, 365. And so that 10 hours is nothing comparatively. And so maybe it's teaching you compassion and having a little compassion for the person that's trying to care for and bring into the world a little suffering little baby who's having a hard time of it, right? And then you look at anything, the person that cut you off in traffic, that person's enlightened, right? And you're like, the person that just flipped me off in traffic, right? That person's enlightened, but you think to yourself, you know what? What could that possibly be teaching me? You know what that person's trying to teach you? How to let go of expectations, how to learn how to keep your cool. It's trying to teach you how to keep your emotional state in check. It's trying to teach you how to stay calm in challenging situations, because just like that person giving you the middle finger when they cut you off in line or whatever it might be, might frustrate you and upset you. If you can learn how to deal with that, then when an actual crisis happens and like Mother Nature's flipping you off and like you got a hard time of it, you can learn how to maybe cope with it, and you can learn how to deal with it from a little bit more of a present manner. And so ever since I read that, I haven't been perfect with it, of course, but it has helped me tremendously improve my outlook and how I, kind of perceive people who maybe I want to judge at first, but know that I probably should look for what I can learn from them instead.
No, that's a beautiful point. I struggle. I know we all struggle with this because losing our cool, it's quite easy to allow that to happen. But if you view each and every opportunity, like the person flipping you off, as a now you're being challenged to control yourself. I like this idea from Wayne Dyer. It goes somewhat like, you do not you do not lose your cool, but it's fuck fuck yeah, it's hard when I'm trying to remember quotes. um man man yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought, but it goes like, it's your choice to react to something. And just because someone is getting to you, you have the ability to say no, to take a step back, because it's your emotions. It's not as if someone else can completely make you react in a way. Well, there's a difference. Are you going to react to something, or are you going to choose your personal response to something? And I love how you put that enlightened spin on everyone. Even the normal average Joe would say, how is a baby enlightened? How is that person losing their cool in traffic enlightened? But that's the beauty in shifting your mindset, is now you're putting yourself to the test. You're trying to take whatever lessons can be learned from any situation. And once you have changed your point of view to view challenges and tests as opportunities for you to become a more controlled and educated being, you're on a path that is not an easy one, but it is the right way. Because now in our world, with the technology we have, the individual is so much more important than ever before. You spoke on how the writers of books and the philosophers of history, all those people have almost dedicated their lives to creating wisdom, putting their minds into sharing what they've worked to figure out. And with technology, the individual has the ability to reach millions and make such an impact on anyone's life. So it's important for each of us, the individual, to take personal accountability for how you react or respond to anything and everything, rather than, it's so easy to blame others for your response. But when you can just take responsibility and ask yourself the questions, why did I, like it's okay to make a mistake, to flip someone off in traffic, but you're taking the right step if you're at least questioning yourself, disliking that you did that. Because nothing great happens overnight. You kind of have to go step one, step two, step three. And hey, if you used to be the guy who loses his cool in traffic all the time, and now you're breathing heavy, but you're at least not flipping people off, that's a step forward. And there's beauty in enjoying the process of just one step at a time. But that's funny. I can't believe I butchered the quote so bad. Sometimes it's hard. I have so many quotes in my notes, and I love to recite them because your input is directly correlated to your output. But that just cracked me up. I got stumped.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I love what you were just commenting on. You had a couple of good points that you made. And listen, if you ever want to add to your input, if you want to add to your input reservoir, Move Me Quotes is the place to be. That's my online library, baby. I got so many quotes for you to take a dive into. So that's there for you if you want to add to your input. But nonetheless, reacting versus responding. What's the difference between the two, right? And I think about this, and I think the real difference between reacting and responding is the person who can add 10 seconds in between their response. Like that's kind of the difference from like a boiled down perspective, right? Reacting is doing it right away. Like as soon as something happens, you knee-jerk response. And a lot of times that looks like flipping your middle finger off, or it might look like something, like swearing at somebody, or I don't know, just doing something like inappropriate. But responding, the only difference is that you can add like at least a 10-second gap between what you are doing, because in that 10 seconds, you want to flip them off, you want to flip them off, you want to flip them off, and then you take a deep breath, and then they're gone. And it's like, you're never going to see that damn car ever again, right? And it's like, there it is. It's just 10 seconds. That's all it takes. If you are looking at that situation of like the crying baby, right? So the baby's crying, it irritates you. You want to turn and yell at the parent, right? Or you want to turn and just make a comment. If you add that 10 seconds in, then you can start remembering, and you take a couple of seconds to kind of breathe and settle. Then you'll have that ability to remember and maybe remind yourself of having compassion. And then maybe you can offer a different kind of response rather than having a reactive, negative kind of action that you take. So reacting versus responding is literally just a few seconds in between. I think this is a really good point to mention for most people in general, because as a martial art instructor, I work with people of all ages. And one of the questions I get often is how can I teach my kids, or how can I teach myself to better calm down, right? Because when I get frustrated, when I get angry, when I get my anxiety built up, I explode. And that's the best analogy that I've come up with, that has been shared many times, I think, for this exact purpose, is just the idea of the pop can, right? If you want to settle the pop can, right? How do you settle a pop can? There's two ways you can settle a pop can that's shaken up, right? That's about to explode. Option A is you don't touch it for an hour, right? And you just leave the pop can alone for an hour. And then after an hour, it'll probably open and it won't like explode, right? If you imagine, like if you dropped it on the floor or something, give it an hour, it'll be fine, or at least not as bad. The second way that you can open it without causing complete chaos is you crack it open a little bit, right? And by cracking it open a little bit, you'll let most of the pressure out slowly rather than all at once. And so how does that relate, right? Where does the metaphor connect? When people are feeling really pent up with pressure inside and they feel like they're ready to explode, I tell people, like I tell the kids, that's to either do one of two things: either talk about it or take a break, right? And so those two things are equivalent of the pop can analogy, right? Because if you don't talk about it or take a break, then C, you're going to explode. And you probably don't want C. And so you got to do A or B. By either talking about it doesn't have to necessarily be conversational. Talking about it can also be writing, and it can be any kind of self-talk. It could be anything that has to do with just putting to words what it is that's going on in here. Because a lot of times it isn't inherently obvious why we're so pressurized, right? We might feel like we have a whole bunch of things, like a whole bunch of different pressure sources, but maybe it's maybe it's not as much as we think, or maybe if we can talk our way through it, we can settle it a little bit more and make it less crazy or convoluted in our minds. And so talking about it is the first. It's like cracking the pop can open. You're starting to let it out a little bit at a time so that it doesn't explode. And then the other one is take a break, right? Because sometimes you're pent up, you have a bunch of frustration and anger, whatever. Sometimes you need to take a break and you need to just step away, right? And this is a good one when it comes to like relationships. If you're in a really heated argument with somebody you really care about, one of the best things you can do is just take a break, right? Take a break and settle, because a lot of times the taking a break, the settling is what's needed. I think when you're in the heat of an argument, a lot of times like one person says something that gets this person thinking about something, and then they respond or react, and then that person starts thinking about something, and then people go back and forth, and then they get angry, and then they get clouded in their thinking, which causes the other person to have clouded thinking because they're trying to uncloud the thinking that was just spit at them. And then it just becomes this back and forth of clouded thinking. And so by taking a break, both people have time to actually settle what was convoluted and what should be clear. And then they can come back at a later point in time and then actually just say what they meant to say from a clear-headed point of view, right? And so reacting versus responding, understanding how you can do one versus the other is so important. Reacting is what happens right away. And a lot of times that's not always the best option. Responding is what happens if you take like that 10-second gap between the stimulus and your response. Give it 10 seconds before you respond, so you have a chance to kind of settle or think. And then if you find yourself in the heat of a pressurized situation, remembering that you should just talk about it or take a break, because if you don't do one of the two, the last example is going to be to break and explode. So yeah, I just wanted to put that in because that was just on my mind. It was a good kind of segue thought.
Yeah, well, raised emotions directly lower intelligence. So when we can just be a little bit self-aware and realize, okay, we're arguing, we're both getting our emotions raised up. I'm going to go take a walk and let's talk about this, in an hour. That will almost save relationships. The biggest issue in most relationships is a lack of clear communication. And you can communicate when your emotions are raised, but it's not clear because what you just said occurs. Both of you are reacting. You're not responding. You're not choosing how you would like to speak to the one you love when you're arguing. You're just back and forth, back and forth. And it's like juggling a hot potato. No one wins. But if you can do some of those, use some of the tools that you mentioned, if it's writing, just get the thoughts on paper or go for that walk. There's just these simple ways to declutter your mind, and then you can come back and whether it's business or relationship, you have a clear way of thinking now once you've let that hot energy out. That's why I love working out, because if I don't, that pent up energy just explodes at some point in the day. But if I work out, it's like, wow. And then of course, it's not just one thing. We have so many tools that can allow us to decompress throughout the day. Meditation, journal, walk, workout, have a good conversation with someone. This type of communication back and forth it's not as if I was pent up before this, but I am using my energy while speaking to you in such a manner that after this conversation, I'm just nice and free and flowing because I just use my energy in a helpful way rather than reacting in a uncontrolled manner where who knows, if I don't have good conversations and take care of myself, then I don't act as if the person I want to become. So there's a lot of tools we can use to allow each day to become a bit more enjoyable by optimizing our moods. And this is very simple things, but I think the simplest aspects of life are what really bring you a happy, successful life, rather than saying, I'll be happy when, or just dreaming of having money and thinking that the money and the girl is going to make you happy. No, you really got to learn how to take care of yourself before you get the money and the girl. So then everything can round out and be good in the end when you do have your dreams, whatever. But it starts with just using tools and learning how to optimize your moods.
Yeah, and there's another great book to plug here is called The Happiness Advantage by Sean Anker. And so in The Happiness Advantage, he talks about brilliant idea, and it goes right in alignment with what you're just talking about. It's the idea that a lot of people think that happiness is the byproduct of success, right? And so once I become successful, then I'll be happy. But what he proves in the book is that it's actually the opposite that's true. It's once you become happy, then you become successful. Right. And so if you can do what you were just talking about, and you can find ways that you can improve your state now, and you can improve your state as is, then the byproduct of that is going to be the success that you were probably hoping for in the first place, because a miserable person is not going to be on the fast track to success. Right. It's going to be the person that is enjoying their time, having fun, has a contagious mood, is vibrating at a high frequency. Like these are the characteristics of a person who attracts kind of like the success into their life, who attracts the right conversations, the right connections, the right meetings, gives off the right vibes in those meetings, closes the deal, makes things happen better. Like your state is everything. And I actually just this past week led a live conversation on happiness. And we were talking about, in one of the Twitter spaces, we were talking about how happiness is something that's created. It's not something that you wait for, and it's not something that you can really chase, right? Happiness is like a recipe in my mind. And I was thinking about how each of us have our own unique recipes for happiness, right? My recipe for happiness probably doesn't look the same as your recipe for happiness. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out what the ingredients are that are going to make up our happiness dish. It's also important to point out that I don't eat the same thing every day. I don't eat the same meal every meal of the day. I switch it up, right? And so it's also important to point out that there's not one personal recipe for happiness. There are many different, right? And so sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I want to have a bowl of cereal. Sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I want to have a smoothie that has all the different kind of like health foods in it, and I'm feeling like that's my vibe. And then there's other times when I'm out having a fancy breakfast with somebody I'm trying to impress, and I want to get fancy with it and have like a 3-course something or other, right? And so we have to be mindful of what kind of meal maybe would best serve us with where we are right now. We have to be mindful of the ingredients that make up that meal, because maybe my ingredients for happiness are some of the things we talked about already. I know that there's a difference between content and complacent. And in my mind, when I think about content versus complacent, both of them communicate a level of being satisfied, right? So both of them are kind of communicating that there's a level of satisfaction. But what's the difference between the two? Because they're not the same. The difference, I think, is the trajectory the trajectory upon which you are moving when you are in those states. When you are in a state of complacency, it is moving you on a downward trajectory, right? Because complacency signifies that you are complacent with where you are and you don't really have a desire to improve, and you're not going to do the things that are going to lead to any kind of growth, right? So it kind of leads you down this path. And even though you might feel like if you start the same, like let's say that right now, today, at this point in time, I decide that I want to be complacent. Well, what that means is I'm probably just going to go watch TV, watch Netflix, scroll my social media, and I'm just going to be complacent. I'm complacent with where I am, with what I have. And then I think the byproduct is I'm going to continue doing more of those complacent activities, which is going to lead me away from where I am now, which is going to make things worse. And I'm going to become more and more discontent. Now, what is content then? Content represents satisfaction, but content is earned. In my mind, content is what happens after the workout, right? If I go sit on my couch when I first wake up in the morning, that's kind of complacent. But if I go and I do my 1-hour workout and then go sit on the couch, that's content. Both of them are sitting on the couch, right? But when I'm doing the first sitting on the couch, it's the trajectory is going down. The second sitting on the couch, the trajectory is going up, right? And so content for me is an earned state. And so I think about how can I earn that state of contentment, because contentment is directly related to happiness. Like you can't be happy and discontent, right? I don't think that those two are equatable. I think that they are more synonyms than anything else. And so how do you become content so that you can become happy? You have to earn it. And you earn it by creating those moments of sitting on the couch. I went this past weekend. I had a moment of regret. I had a long weekend. It was Memorial Day weekend. And the Buffalo Half Marathon was happening in Buffalo that Sunday of the long weekend. And so I was kind of planning on doing it. And, I'm always exercising and working out. So I'm in shape enough to do it. But I ultimately kind of just was like, I'm just going to have a weekend of relaxing. I'm just going to, not run the marathon. I'm just going to actually stay up late, watch Netflix, whatever, and just kind of recover, because I had been so busy. And so I woke up that Sunday morning at 9 a.m., something like that, like 9 a.m. And the marathon started at 6:30 a.m. And so by 9 a.m., I was looking at highlight reels of everybody finishing and everybody holding up their medals and everybody getting their tumblers and everybody talking about how hard it was and how proud of themselves they were. And I woke up and I was like, God damn it. I was like, I should have done it. I should have run the marathon because I know that it would have given me a different feel. And I know I could have done it. I know that I wanted to do it, but I just let my complacency take over at that point in time. And so what did I do? I went outside and I was like, I can't live with, I'm not going to live with this regret right now. And so I went outside and I ran a half marathon around my neighborhood. And I just did like a 13.1, and I just did however many laps it was. I think it was like 10 laps around this loop in my neighborhood. And I finished it and it was god awful. It was the worst time to run. It was from 11 to, I ran it from 11 to 1, which is the hottest time of the day. It was blazing hot. Sun was direct. There was no clouds. I was definitely dehydrated because I did this on a whim. And it was so, and the second half of it, I was just so hurt because like my knees, my ankles, like everything in my body was hurting, but it was that mental callousing. And I told myself, I'm not stopping until I finish. And I did that and I pushed through, and I'm thankful I did, because you know what? When I had that first sip of water and that first bite of food and I sat on that chair, that's fucking contentment to me, right? I sat there and I was so content with the fact that I did that. And I was just like complete bliss, right? No regrets, just totally like good. Like I can just sit on the couch, I can watch TV the rest of the day and I am good, right? Because I know my trajectory is on the way up. And so that's the difference for me. And so my ingredients for happiness look a lot like the activities that involve delaying gratification. So for me, so much of it has to do with exercise. It has to do with reading and writing and things that feel bad in the moment. Like reading, like if I had the choice, like with the way my brain is just wired as is to like watch TV or read, I'm going to watch TV, right? I have to like overcome that innate desire to move to that path of comfort and choose the discomfortable thing now so that I can be content later. And I think that that's the process for me of building happiness in my life, is a lot of exercising, reading, writing, meditating, connecting with people, right? Like it's not easy to have these conversations. And I'm sure it took a lot of work to get ready for a conversation like this, because you don't know where the hell the conversation is going to go. And you have to have all these tangents ready. And you're like, well, what if there comes a point in the conversation where he just stops and I don't have a segue? I have to have a question ready. And there's a lot of prep that goes into that, right? And I get it, because I run live Twitter spaces, and those are nerve-wracking as hell, because a lot of times you don't know who the hell is going to even show up. And so it's like, you got to have all sorts of tangents ready to go. But because it's hard, and because there's a level of like reward and meaning to it, you get that byproduct of contentment afterward. Like, I did that thing, now I can relax. And that's how I've learned for myself, I can relax the most. I can relax easiest, and I can feel that contentment only when it's earned. And so I vow to like get things done during the day so that I can rest at night. I have a hard time resting when I haven't gotten things done in some way, shape, or form. And I've become aware of that in my life. And so I try to keep that at the forefront so that I can keep that state of contentment alive, which is keeping my trajectory going forward, which is helping me continue to build the skills, which is helping me continue to do the things that are going to lead to what you might consider success, because I'm just enjoying the process more, if that makes sense. I know I took that in a ton of different directions, but that's just something that was on the top of my mind, because it's something I've been writing a lot about too in my daily blog. So anyways, there's that.
That is like complete guidance to anyone who is not feeling good on their day-to-day basis. The act of first just noticing, am I complacent or am I content? And I 100% resonate. The only time I can relax is after a good day of delaying gratification. Like doing the actions you mentioned, I'm the same way. Do I want to read, or could I much rather watch some TV or do anything but reading, to be completely honest? But when you read, I sit down, set a timer for 60 minutes. and I've earned it. Once I finished, I can do something else and my mind is stress-free because I did something I didn't want to do. See, that's the funniest part about our human existence is the consciousness only feels good when you do things that you don't want to do. It's so odd, but it makes sense because instant gratification just brings regret. Whatever type of pleasures, that's the thing. There's a difference between being content and having pleasure. And I had no idea about this as a younger person. Probably from the age of 18 to 20, I just did nothing but pleasurable activities. And then I just got so sick of the state of mind I was living in. I felt like, is this all there is to life? And then I started delaying gratification. And what do you know? It's not easy. Like with that 13-mile half marathon you went on, I've ran 13 miles once in my life. And oh my God, that was hard. Absolutely hard. But when you finish, it's like such an amazing feeling. So this reminds me, this is why I'm so drawn to David Goggins, because he's real with you. He lets you know you have to delay gratification or else you're going to feel like trash. So it's like, I like this saying, choose your hard. It's hard to be fat and it's hard to be ripped. It's hard to be poor and it's hard to be rich. It's hard to judge others and always be that negative, pessimistic person. And it's hard to appreciate others and say, hey, man, I see what you're doing. I like what you're doing. So choose which hard you would like. They're both going to be hard. So why not choose the one that you delay gratification and you actually get that content feeling from? Too many people are complacent and they don't realize what's on the other side. When you're complacent, you think life is good, but it could be so much better. The feeling that you get when you really do hard things, you can't put it into words. A lot of this life is just feelings, and some people get it and some people don't.
Yeah. And I just want to add something to that too, because this is an important point to add on to what you just said. It's important to, again, going back to this analogy of happiness being a recipe, right? I think that just like when you make some dishes, there are ingredients that are bitter and there are ingredients that are sweet. And sometimes you need a combination of the both, right? To make the dish really bring out the full texture and flavor of whatever it is you're trying to cook. Just like in life, you don't want everything to be delayed gratification, right? You don't want to just always delay gratification and always put yourself through misery, because that can ultimately lead to misery, right? Because if all I'm doing is delaying gratification and I'm like only running 10 miles a day and eating lettuce and reading like god awful, like super dense, wordy biographies, then I'm not going to be enjoying my time, right? And sometimes too much delayed gratification is a bad thing. And so I think it's important to point out that you have to be mindful of what your recipe is going to consist of, because it took me a long time to get to a place of being able to delay as much gratification as I delay on a day-to-day basis. I delay a lot of gratification every day. And I do that only because I've built up to that point. It's a tolerance, right? And so when you first start out, you know, we were talking about running 13 miles. I'm not recommending people run 13 miles, you know, on a regular basis so that they can feel happy. That is not what I'm recommending. What I do want to point out is that it's a tolerance and it's a recipe, and it's something that needs to be customized to where you're at in your life. And so when you are looking at where you are, like when I look at where I was when I was 11 years old, first starting to try martial arts again, I wasn't really delaying much gratification at all. I mean, I was pretty much instant gratification all the time. I was 11. And so I'm eating sweet foods. I'm playing outside with my friends. I'm playing video games. I mean, I'm doing what 11-year-old kids do. All they do is they try to have as much instant gratification as possible. That is the existence of 11-year-olds, as far as I understand it, right? And so when I started martial arts, though, that's when I started getting a taste of what delaying gratification tastes like, right? I started tasting it for this idea of like exercising, and then the next day I felt good. And so I exercised again and I felt good and I was learning a skill and I did this martial art form and people liked it and I felt good. And I was like, whoa, there's something here that I'm not getting by not doing those things. And so I think that my recipe then and my recipe now are very different recipes. And anyone starting out on their journey towards finding this state of contentment, if all you're doing is receiving instant gratification all the time, I would recommend that you only delay a little bit of gratification at the start. So my example was the first healthy habit that I adopted outside of martial art training. So martial art training was like the first healthy habit that I adopted. And I started training 2-3 times per week. And then it kind of increased slowly over the course of many years from there, as I outlined in the beginning of the interview. One of the first healthy habits I adopted outside of my martial art training was I chose to start drinking coffee black. I was only 12 or 13, but I was teaching martial arts at 3 o'clock till 9 o'clock, right? And so I started drinking coffee in the afternoon, not in the morning, but I started drinking coffee in the afternoon. I was drinking double doubles, right? 2 creams, 2 sugars. And I got to a point after a year of that where I was like, I think I'm just going to start drinking coffee black because cream and sugar, neither is good for you, right? They're both awful for you, but they taste good. And that's the instant gratification, is like the really good taste. And so I started drinking coffee black. It was a delayed gratification because I wasn't getting that sugar that I craved, but I ultimately came to appreciate it. And now all I do is drink coffee black, and I love drinking coffee black. And it's the only way I'll drink coffee. And it became a part of my lifestyle. From there, I started adding other things into the lifestyle. I'll give you 2 more examples. I'd say probably 4, 5, 6, 7 months later, something like this. I decided I was going to cut donuts for whatever reason, right? I just decided that donuts were the worst food on the planet for your body. And so I'm just not going to eat them, right? That was just the mindset I was in at the time. And so it's not like I was eating them all the time, but I was eating them enough to the point where, like not eating them would make a difference long-term, right? And so I chose to stop. I just decided to cut donuts altogether. And so I did. And I haven't really had donuts since. Maybe I can count the number of times on my hands that I've had donuts in the course of like 15 years, right? And it's just because, maybe there was like a vegan donut, like someone wanted to try, or like something like this, like just specialty occasions. But nonetheless, the other example of adopting healthy habits into my life came amongst this idea of cutting pop, right? And pop was something that I was drinking all the time for instant gratification because it tastes amazing. But I ultimately decided that it was just drinking calories was an awful, awful thing to do. And so I decided to take that out. And that was huge for my lifestyle. And I started just drinking water and seltzer waters and whatever else was available, but no pop. And so that was another way of delaying gratification. And that happened over the course of months. And so the plug I just wanted to add in extension to what you were saying is that delaying gratification is good, just like bitter ingredients in a recipe for happiness is good sometimes. But you also need to have some sugar, right? So sometimes I'm not a chef, so I can't think of a recipe offhand that calls for a little bit of sugar, but you get my point. Like, it's okay in your day, right? And I actually want to say 2 things. The first thing I want to say is within the frame of a day, it's okay to like delay a little gratification and then have some instant gratification. It's okay to have both. And then in the frame of a week, right? So that's how I build in my time for watching TV, like watching Netflix, for example. Like, I don't watch Netflix every day, but I do allow myself time to watch Netflix once a week, right? And so after a week of, reading, writing, reflecting, blah, blah, then on one of those days or 2 of those days, I'll allow myself to like watch 2, 3, 4 episodes on Netflix, just so I can just check out. Like, I don't want to think about personal development anymore. I don't want to think about growth anymore. I don't want to have any more conversations about self-improvement. I just want to like let my mind vegetate, and I just want to like check out and then just do nothing for a little bit, because that's important too, right? You got to have both. So that's the point I want to make, is that you have to be mindful of where you are in your journey, what ingredients are going to be important for your happiness. But it's also, you can't just have sugar too, right? If all you're doing is eating sugar, you're going to be fucking miserable. Even though you think you're getting instant gratification, it leads you more and more and more into a deeper and deeper state of discontentment, because the trajectory is downward, because that's the complacency. And so if you want to change the trajectory, you have to include the other kind of ingredients. You can't just have sugar. You got to have the other ingredients in your recipe, because otherwise you're drinking pixie sticks all day, and that's not good for you, right?
Matt Hogan, that your input to this podcast has been beautiful. I can't put into words the amount of pleasure I've gotten from speaking with you. If you want to send the audience anywhere, where should we send the audience?
I write one article a day. You can read it in 1 minute or less. I send it out every day because it's my active way of reflecting on my life and thinking about how I can condense some of the thoughts in my life into its most digestible form, so that people can just get like dripped insights to their inbox. And so if you want to find me anywhere, it's gonna be matthogan.blog. That's where you'll find me. I write there every day. That's where I spend most of my time. And I would love to have you guys check that out. That's my little home for my writing. It's my home for my products, and it's the home for my media connection. So matthogan.blog.
Awesome. I'll be signing up for that right after we end this. So I appreciate you, and just such a pleasure to speak with you. My mood is great. We're going to feel content because the work that went into this, man, I appreciate you, and I wish, have a good day, my man.